Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is Christian here. Thank you so much for joining me today. So today it is day 4 of Dupe Week. If you're not familiar with what Dupe Week is, it is a new series that I started here on my channel where for an entire week we post dupes of high-end makeup. I will have the playlist link down below. Basically, I got the idea from doing Dupe Week after I did my Shop Hush haul on Monday, which will be linked down below. As I was showing you guys the different products that I did pick up from Shop Hush, I started pulling out the different products that it was, the high-end products that it was duping, and I was like, oh my gosh, we need to talk about this. This needs to be a video. So I have done 2 videos on Natasha Denona at this point, and of course the haul, and then today will be the third. So today will be the third palette that we will be talking about in Dupe Week, and it is going to be a Kat Von D dupe. No, she did not re-release her Metal Matte eyeshadow palette, but upon first glance you might think she did. So if you're interested in Dupe Week, you are going to want to go ahead and keep on watching. But before I get into that video, I just want to say that if you were new to my channel, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I would really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button down below. Subscribing to my channel, as you know, just means that you will not miss any future uploads that I do post. And yeah, you guys, if you are not new to my channel, welcome back. Thank you for continuing to join and support. And let's go ahead and continue on with Dupe Week. The palette that is going to be in question today is the Kat Von D Metal Matte eyeshadow palette, which was released during holiday of 2016. It was Kat Von D's holiday palette. Now this guy was a Sephora exclusive for holiday 2016. It has since been discontinued because it was a limited edition item. So when you open it up, this is what the actual palette itself looks like. It does come with 22 different shades. You did get 9 of Kat Von D's Metal Crush eyeshadows, and then you got 13 of her matte eyeshadows. And I quite enjoyed this palette. When I first got this palette in the mail, I was very pleasantly surprised by the color selection, the size of the palette. I felt like for the money, this was actually a really, really great palette. I thought the quality of it was really nice. Kat Von D tends to release some really awesome holiday palettes, and all of the ones that I have purchased I tend to really enjoy. I regret missing out on the Mi Vida Loca palette from 2015, but I do think that this is a really nice palette. And I did pull it out a lot, of course, to test it against the dupe. I also paired it a lot with her palette from holiday 2017, the Satan Center, because I thought that it had some more basic everyday mattes and it made it a little bit easier for me to use the Satan Center palette. So let's go ahead and take a look at this guy. And let me go ahead and show you the packaging, which I kind of already did. So when you look at it from one way, it says metal. When you look at it from the other direction, it says matte. And on the back, you get all 22 shade names. Kat Von D is a cruelty-free makeup brand, so I thought I would go ahead and throw that in there for you guys. I'm pretty sure most people know that Kat Von D is cruelty-free. And the palette that we are going to be putting this guy up against is a palette that I did purchase, or I purchased this palette directly off of Shop Hush's app. And this is the, I mean, come on you guys. This is the Natural palette by the brand, I believe it's Okalan. Everything about this palette screams dupe. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember how much I paid for this, but I'm pretty sure it was under $20. I will link it somewhere on the screen or down below for you guys. And wait till I open this up, because when I saw this, I was like, oh my freaking gosh, no they didn't. You thought that the Shade and Light Contour palette was bad, the one by Makeup Revolution, but this, you guys, that is what the inside of this package looks like. And then when you flip it over, again, it does have all of the shade names on the back. The shade names, unlike the Kat Von D palette, doesn't take up the entire back. They have some graphics and how-to that also look very similar to Kat Von D drawings. So they went there with this palette. Like, it was not a question in their minds of that they were going to be doing a complete 100% dupe for the Kat Von D Shade and Light palette. Let me go ahead and do up close so you can see what they look like up close. The Kat Von D one is on the top and the Shop Hush dupe is on the bottom. And you can see the colors are identical, the shade names are identical, the layout are identical. This palette is a complete 100% copy of the Kat Von D Metal Matte palette. Like, I was actually so surprised by that when I saw this. And I want to say that they also now have a dupe for the new Satan Center palette on Shop Hush, but it's not as obvious of a dupe as far as like the layout and things like that are concerned. And they have the exact same amount of product in each of these palettes. The 9 metallics and the 13 mattes are the exact same amount of product from one versus the other. So you get, let me go ahead and tell you guys really quickly, in the metallics, you get 9 of those at 1.7 grams each. And in the In the mattes, you get 13 at 1.7 grams. Or 0.06 ounces each. I believe I'm saying that correctly. We're gonna go ahead and talk about a couple of the differences. So I do have the Kat Von D palette on one of my eyes, and I do have the Dupe palette on the other eye. So really quickly, when you look at both palettes, just by first glance, they do look identical. However, there is one color, and I'll go ahead and point it out for you now. Of course, like all of my dupe videos, I will have up close swatches of all of these. The shade Tinsel is different. The shade Tinsel in the Dupe palette pulls a little bit more blue, whereas the shade Tinsel in the Kat Von D palette is truly, truly silver. I'll go ahead and swatch that for you now so you guys can go ahead and see. So let's go ahead and take the shade Tinsel. This is what the shade Tinsel looks like swatched from the Dupe palette. And that's it swatched right there. And then we'll take Tinsel from the Kat Von D palette, which again is going to be a true silver. And that is the shade Tinsel right here. Let's go ahead and swatch it out. It looks like it's picking up true on camera when I look in my monitor. This is the Kat Von D, so you can definitely tell that there is a slight difference between the two shades. Just by the swatch, I don't think that you would be able to tell that this is two completely different makeup brands, because they do look really nice. They do both have the same amount of like shine, the same amount of like glittery shimmer, because there is a little bit of shimmer running through both of these eyeshadows. So outside of the color, they do look pretty much identical as far as the quality of the shadows themselves is concerned. You guys, I am wearing a different scarf. Don't be alarmed. It is not voodoo magic. It is just the power of editing. I had to come back on and refilm some of the footage, and I left my house and came back and I put on a different scarf and yada yada yada. But before I go any further into the video, I'm going to go ahead and insert swatches. As always, I will be swatching the Dupe palette first. I decided to go ahead and do the swatches a little earlier in these videos because I usually kind of wait towards the end. I will go ahead and swatch the Dupe palette first, followed by the Kat Von D palette. I will be doing, of course, finger swatches only, so that way you guys can see up close and personal the differences of the actual eyeshadow palettes and all of that good stuff. So if you're interested in seeing the swatches, then go ahead and keep on watching. Alright guys, so now that we have the swatches out of the way, I will go ahead and say, well, I do think that the palette is good, and I do think that it is a pretty good spot on Dupe. I do prefer some of the other dupes as far as formulation and blendability of other brands like Bad Habit. I think that Bad Habit is really, really good, and I think that their formulations are a little bit more spot on. However, I don't think that this is a bad palette. I do think it is easy to work with. I had no issues using either. I had no issues with the Dupe palette whatsoever. But I do think that the formulations are, especially in the mattes, it's a little bit more noticeable. As I would have mentioned earlier, the Kat Von D mattes, even though they typically tend to be a little bit more powdery, like if I pull out some of my older Kat Von D palettes and stick a brush into it, a lot of powder will kick up. Now, I hadn't used this palette in probably since last year until I pulled it out a couple of months ago when I was playing with her new palette, and then I was comparing it back and forth between the two. I was actually pleasantly surprised how little kick up this palette has, because I'm so used to Kat Von D's palettes having a little bit more dust and a little bit more kick up. Maybe these shadows were a little bit more firmly pressed. These definitely are smoother to the touch than the Dupe palette. Other than the color variations that I would have already spoken about, I don't notice any other difference in any colors. Like I mentioned earlier, some of Kat Von D's more vibrant shades, especially this blue, look more vibrant in the actual Kat Von D palette than they do in the Dupe palette. The more neutral shades look identical, and the majority of all of the shimmer shades or the metallics look exactly the same, except for, again, tinsel. I have worn this palette quite often, and I've never really had any issues. I feel like both of these palettes, I mean, they're the exact same palette, just different brands. I think that it's really easy to create looks out of both of them. You have a ton of neutral shadows. You have a couple of pops of color. You have your staple really metallic high shine. I think Kat Von D does metallics and high shine extremely, extremely well. I mean, so far, all in all, even though I don't think that this dupe is as great as the other ones that we talked about the last couple of days, all in all, it's still good. I feel like if you missed out on the Kat Von D Metal Matte Palette for Holiday 2016 and you wanted to pick this palette up, I think that this palette might go ahead and satisfy your curiosity or your regret for not picking this guy up. I would love to see what Kat Von D has to say about this, because I know she lost it whenever the Makeup Revolution palette came into play, whenever she saw that, and she was pretty much like, how unoriginal are you? All you did was change the name. Instead of being Shade and Light, you made it Light and Shade. Well, this took the shade names, this took the, you know, the actual layout, the actual formulation, the design, and all they did, see, I'm even holding up the wrong palette right now. This is the Dupe palette. All they did was change it from a black packaging to a blue packaging. Of course, Kat Von D's palette is a little bit cooler because it has the, I forget what it's called, with the Kat Von D palette. You can flip it either way, and then it'll have metal matte. I think that is a really nice design. I feel like the mirror I know that some people don't care about the mirror, but I'd go ahead and mention it anyway. I feel like the mirror in both of these are pretty comparable. I feel like in the hand, they feel pretty similar. If you want to get nitpicky, maybe the Kat Von D one is a little bit heavier. I think I already mentioned that as well. I mean, they look identical. I mean, if you hold it like this, as far as packaging is concerned, Kat Von D has the writing letting you know what the palette actually is. The Dupe palette does not. It's a copy, you guys, and I tend to not like to go back and forth between like copy and dupe, but this is like a blatant copy. I'm okay with that in the sense of, like I've said in every single one of these videos, not everybody wants to spend $60 and upwards on eyeshadow palettes. Not everybody can afford to. Not everybody had the opportunity to pick up this palette. So the fact that a brand came out with a pretty decent copy or replica, whatever you want to say, of a really great palette, I'm all for it. Now, the only thing that I would say is, when it comes to dupe palettes, if you're going to dupe something, like if you're going to be bold enough and to make like an exact copy with just minor differences, at least make sure that the quality of the palette that you're creating is somewhat decent. And I do think that the quality of this palette actually is somewhat decent. I would be bold enough to say it's actually pretty good. I mean, it's not the best palette that I've ever used in my life. I do like Kat Von D shadows. There are shadows that I do prefer more than hers, but there are a ton of shadows that I think are not as good as hers. So, but on a scale of 1 to like absolute dupe, I would probably say that this is about a 9, a definite. I would probably say, as far as layout and everything like that, and aesthetic wise, this is probably like a 9.5. As far as the formulation, the blendability, the ease of use, I would say that this is probably a dupe 7 out of 10, which is still a passing grade, maybe even like a 7.5. I would say that the shimmers, and that's the thing in every single one of these palettes, you can typically tell a makeup brand quality wise from their mattes. Mattes are definitely always going to be a little bit harder to do and a little bit harder to pull off. Shimmers are always going to be just a little bit easier to, I guess, dupe, if you would say. Most people would say you can tell if a shadow is good or if a brand makes good shadows by the mattes in which they perform. While we're here, we're going to go ahead and take a couple of the shades so that way you guys can see some live swatches. Of course, I would have already put in the up close swatches of me with this particular palette, but we're gonna go ahead and let's go ahead and take the black. Now, I will go ahead and say, like I mentioned, I do test all of these shadows out several days in a row. I don't just come on camera and say, look guys, a dupe. Like, I actually play with the eyeshadows. I actually test them out on my eyes several times before I come on camera. Unlike the other eyeshadows that I have talked about in the previous 2 videos where I tested every single shade in those palettes, this one I have not. I have not used the black or the blue on my eye or the Nebula. So I've never used Nebula, Jet, or Velour on my eye. All of the other shades in here I have played with. Have I used the white? You know what? No, I have not used the white either. So, and the same thing in this palette. I think over time, because I've had the palette so long, I've kind of played around with them, but I've never really like created eye looks because I don't wear black very often, and when I do, it's always a very minimal amount. So we're going to go ahead, and I have already swatched the black, but we're going to go ahead and do it again. I have definitely swatched all of these and played with all of them, and you can feel it. The formulation of these are drier. Like, they don't feel as high end, I guess. I don't like the way that sounds. The eyeshadows in this particular palette definitely do feel drier than the ones in the Kat Von D palette. So to touch, they don't feel quite the same. And that is what the black looks like swatch. You can see it doesn't provide like the absolute best color pigmentation. Of course, I can probably build it up a little bit more and get full opacity. We're gonna go ahead and take this black from the Kat Von D palette. Both of them are named Jet. And it just feels smoother. And we're gonna go ahead and swatch the Kat Von D. So that's it right there. So this is the Kat Von D. This is the dupe, and I'm actually kind of surprised. So the Kat Von D, even though it is not as full and opaque, I don't know if you guys be able to tell, the Kat Von D definitely is a little bit more consistent in the color, whereas this one you can definitely see the dupe, you can definitely see a little bit more powdery into where it didn't blend out fully. So that's what I mean by their mattes not being as good, even though the Kat Von D black is probably not the blackest I've ever used. The Natasha Denona black is darker, and I would even say that the Urban Decay, I can't remember the name of it right now, but even the Urban Decay black is darker and a little bit more opaque. So it's not my favorite black, but hopefully that up close swatch will let you know what I meant about a little bit more drier consistency in the dupe palette versus the Kat Von D palette. Let's go ahead and swatch one more. Let's go ahead and swatch the shade Synergy. This is the dupe palette again. You see I have to keep looking because it is really hard to tell just at a glance. We're going to go ahead and take the shade Synergy, and that is it swatch right here. And they definitely apply very smooth. It definitely has a lot of pigment. We're going to go ahead and take Synergy from the Kat Von D palette. The Kat Von D shadow, this is the Kat Von D right here. Even her metallics, they definitely feel a lot thicker in a good way. Like, it feels like, I don't know how to describe it, almost like maybe more dimethicone-y. I have to pull the ingredient list to see if there actually is dimethicone in these shadows, but it definitely does feel like there is. And they feel thicker, they feel heavier. So I scoured the internet just really quickly because it was really bothering me. I wanted to find the ingredients of the two. The dupe palette just kind of has all of the ingredients listed out. The first 2 ingredients being talc and mica. And the Kat Von D palette, of course, has it separated out by her Metal Crush formulation versus her matte. In the Metal Crush formulations, it looks like the first 2 ingredients were talc, mica, and then the third ingredient was dimethicone. So I felt like these shadows were very dimethicone-y, so that makes perfect sense with dimethicone being the third ingredient. There is no dimethicone in this palette, but I would go ahead and mention that there is mineral oil in this particular palette. I know that there are people who do have sensitivity to mineral oil. I am pretty sensitive when it comes to mineral oil. Like, I will not put mineral oil on my face. Per se. I try to avoid it on my face, But on my eye, I've never really noticed anything as far as irritations or anything like that, but I thought that I would go ahead and throw that in there for you as well. So the formulations of these shadows definitely are similar, but the two main ingredients are exactly the same. All in all, if you haven't guessed it, I do think that this is a pretty consistent dupe. I do think that there are differences in the formulations of the eyeshadow, but again, it's not by the same brand. The eyeshadows are not going to perform exactly the same. They're not going to be identical. I do prefer the more dimethicone feel of the Kat Von D eyeshadows. I think that it gives them a little bit more slip. I think it gives it a slightest bit more high shine, and they last forever on the lids, which you wouldn't think they would, but they do. This palette also has pretty decent longevity as well. I've probably worn this palette between 5 and 8 times by now. I've worn it to work. I've tested it out with a bunch of different primers, and I noticed that this palette the dupe palette does have a little bit more longevity, but I do notice that the mattes do wear off a little bit faster in my crease. But I do have hooded eyes, so take that for what you will. So really quickly, I am going to go ahead and mention, now this is a palette depending on what shades you wear. As I do in every single dupe video, I have the high-end palette on one eye and the dupe palette on the other eye. Now on this eye look, you can tell the difference because I did go in with the shade Tinsel, and I did go in with the shade Tinsel just so you guys can really kind of see it on my eye, the differences. I don't know if you can tell in the camera, but up close, like when I look in my mirror, I can tell that I have two different eyeshadows on the center of my lid. One definitely pulls more silver, one definitely pulls a little bit more blue. So, I mean, the average person isn't gonna wear two different eyeshadow palettes at the exact same time to try to create the same look. I mean, I wear two different eyeshadow palettes all the time, but you know, on both eyes. That is the only downside, because I honestly think that Tinsel is a really beautiful, true silver. So I'm a little disappointed that they couldn't get that color right. But everything else, with the exception of the blue, I think that the blue is a little bit different in consistency as well in the dupe versus the Kat Von D palette. I do think that, as I've mentioned, the formulations of course are going to be different, but this palette is usable, it is workable, it is pretty good, and I would definitely rate it a passing score. One more thing to note, the shimmers, the metallics definitely do have fallout. I noticed that because I did my face makeup first, and I usually do my face makeup afterwards. The metallics definitely have a little bit of fallout. Typically speaking, I don't know if I mentioned this already, but typically speaking, Kat Von D eyeshadows always have a lot of fallout, and I didn't really notice a lot of fallout with her mattes in this particular palette. I did notice a teeny bit more fallout with these guys right here. So again, that's not typically true to Kat Von D's formula. I don't know if it's because this palette is older and it's been sitting a while, and maybe the formulation has changed over time, because this palette is well over a year old. I don't know if that could have anything to do with it. I do always wear primers. I do always wear glitter glues. With primers and glitter glues, they work perfectly well. So yeah, you guys, if you were interested in this palette the next time it comes back in stock, as I've mentioned in every single one of these videos, you have to stock Shop Hush's website, you have to stock their app, and you have to stock their website, and you have to have their Instagram to know when any of their stuff is going to kind of pop back up and come back online, because it does change, it does vary. And like, I went online earlier this morning, and then like 3 hours later I hopped back on, and a couple of the palettes that I wanted for next dupe week for next month was back in stock, so I had to order them right away before they sold out again. So I really hope that you guys did enjoy this video. I really hope that you found it helpful and informative. I have definitely seen a lot of interest in Shop Hush, and people being very curious on whether or not they think that they should purchase from them, whether or not the quality of the eyeshadows or the quality of the products are good. As of right now, I have not worn any of their face palettes, but as far as the eyeshadows are concerned, I definitely think that they're pretty good, and for the price, you cannot beat it. Especially if some of these limited edition palettes that maybe you yourself did not get your hands on, it's worth taking a look at. I have had no issues. I have been wearing these eyeshadows a ton. I have had no irritation on my eyes, and keep in mind, there are different brands. So there's Face Candy, there is there is Okalan, there is Bad Habit, there is a couple of other brands that I can't think of off the top of my head. So it's not just Shop Hush as one major brand, and they kind of just push out a bunch of different dupe products. Think of Shop Hush as like the affordable Sephora, which is basically kind of what it is, because you can go into Sephora and buy the high-end version, or you can hop on Shop Hush and buy the dupe. So I haven't had any issues with it, and I have pretty sensitive skin, you guys, and I think that the eyeshadows that I have tried have been really great. So I really hope that you are finding these videos helpful. If you are, please don't forget to subscribe before you head out. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Sound off in the comments below if you would like Dupe Week to become a reoccurring thing on my channel, maybe once a month, maybe every other month, because I think it's kind of fun. I'm enjoying buying the dupes and testing them out. And yeah, you guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in tomorrow's video. Bye, guys.